After 62 nights of terrorizing downtown Portland, there seems to be a deal that is struck between the governor in Oregon and the acting head of DHS, Secretary of Homeland Security, Chad Wolf. They've been talking, and they've reached a, quote, joint plan to end the violent activity in Portland directed at federal properties and law enforcement officers. That plan, this is all up on Fox News, includes the robust presence of Oregon State Police in downtown Portland. State and local law enforcement will begin securing properties and streets, especially those surrounding federal properties that have been under nightly attack for the past 2 months. Oregon State Police will coordinate with Federal Protective Service officers to ensure all federal facilities remain protected and secure. Oh, so after the deployment of federal officers and the humiliation, the national humiliation that these governors and mayors have received because of, there's finally some news coverage of all of this. After that happens, now finally, cops are going to be allowed, state and local police will be allowed to do their jobs and protect federal buildings in Portland. I got to say, I'm not convinced that they will do the job. I mean, I think they'll probably make a show of it for a while, but these lunatic leftists, they live there. They're not going anywhere. They're not going to just disappear entirely. They'll wait until the heat passes a little bit, so to speak, and then they'll start doing this crap again. We got an election, folks. You think that now the Democrat left is going to, I got to stop saying it, just the Democrats, because the Democrats are the left. Interchangeable. Let's use these words interchangeably, right? It's like tomato, tomato, Democrat and leftist. I mean, there's a little bit of distinction that we could talk about, but it's pretty darn close. So yeah, Governor Kate Brown comes out here. After my discussion with Vice President Pence and others, this was on Twitter, the federal government has agreed to withdraw federal officers from Portland. They've acted as an occupying force and brought violence. Wow. What a lunatic. Starting tomorrow, all Customs and Border Protection and ICE officers will leave downtown Portland. Our local Oregon State Police officers will be downtown to protect Oregonians' right to free speech and keep the peace. Let's center the Black Lives Matter movement's demands for racial justice and police accountability. It's time for bold action to reform police practices. What a disgraceful moron she is. Yeah, it's about justice for George Floyd. That's why they want to burn down a federal courthouse. The guy that killed George Floyd is probably spending the rest of his life in prison. Does this always just get forgotten in this whole conversation? No one said it was okay. Everyone said it was horrible. And he's very likely, I mean, he's innocent until proven guilty in a court of law, but he's very likely to spend the rest of his life in prison. They act like this was something, the way the left talks about this, the way the Democrats discuss this issue, it's as though we all said, yeah, what that officer did, that's standard procedure, sorry. The guy's going to live the rest of his life in a cell, most likely. So when they say they want justice, now we could talk about is there really such a thing when someone is murdered, when someone is killed? Is there such a thing as justice? Well, that's another conversation. But it's not a particular injustice in this case through the system. But Governor Kate Brown doesn't think through any of that, doesn't care about any of that. She is an abominable disgrace. This is the problem. Oregon, I've been to Oregon. I've actually been to Portland. Such a beautiful state and such cool people, such good food. There's a lot to love. There's a lot to love about it. The coastline is amazing in Oregon. If you've never been to the Pacific Northwest, the coastline there is so beautiful. So much to like about it. The politics there, though. I mean, look, the loony left is running the show. The loony left is running the show. So we'll see what happens now that they're... Oh, and my other favorite thing is that they were... This was great. I mean, favorite as in it's just another example of how outrageous the whole thing is. They were threatening to sue. This is real. They were threatening to sue the federal government for an unauthorized fence. That's right, an unauthorized fence. You can't make this stuff up. They wanted to, every 15 minutes, they were going to be sending the federal government a bill. Portland is fining feds $500 every 15 minutes for a fence surrounding a courthouse. That's right. These little petty totalitarian nutzos, these wackadoos, and I'm talking about the people running the government there. They were going to start sending the federal government a bill because they had to build a fence to protect federal property, and they didn't get like the permitting process or something. I got news for the governor of Oregon and the mayor, Ted Wheeler, the little Antifa errand boy. I got news for them. Oregon and Portland are, in fact, under the jurisdiction of the United States federal government. Yeah, I know that's kind of a shock. This was coming from the Portland City Council. Same thing, same idea. Oh, my gosh. Portland fines the feds $200,000 so far over the fence outside the courthouse. That's right. Just going to try to squeeze the federal. Look, it's all politics, right? Squeeze the federal government for money. Portland spends $200,000 every 30 seconds paying, bureaucrats who are entirely useless. So it's not like this is a big chunk of change in the grand scheme of things. But it just shows you what the attitude is. It shows you the attitude is. After all we've been through, after all we've learned, we end up having a situation here where, sure enough, we can't expect Democrats to take action that should be nonpartisan, right? This is not about safe streets, protecting federal courthouses. This is not supposed to be an issue of left or right. But increasingly, we see that they just don't care. Bill Barr asked them yesterday, we don't have this audio, but Bill Barr asked them yesterday, why is it that only Republicans seem to be against rioting? And that's a very powerful question to ask. Why is it the case that only Republicans right now are making a public case against rioting? I thought we were all supposed to be against rioting. I thought we were all supposed to be in favor of the rule of law, safety, and property rights. I know we're not. I'm not naive. Buck, what are you talking about? The libs are insane. Of course, I'm the one who tells you every day they're insane. We know this. But to see it at this level, it's so brazen. They're not even hiding it is the point, right? It used to be, this is like what the Democrats would do on immigration. It used to be, oh, we want a secure border too. And then they'd work constantly, undermine the border, undermine the border, undermine the border, right? Oh, no, we want a secure border too. No, undermine the border. Behind closed doors, behind the scenes, the media cheering them on the whole time, right? But they would say, technically, yeah, we want a secure border. Law and order was something that they would say, oh, no, we all want safety on the streets. And then they promote all these ideas, bail reform and so on and so forth, all these things that make us less safe. And now we've gotten to the point where we are less safe. And what do? Oh, that's right. They say, yeah, this is the way it is. This is how it happens. This is how the cookie crumbles, America. Democrats want you to know that you are less safe, that the government is not on your side unless you will do their bidding. They will not protect your rights unless you are a little, bleating sheep for the left. Then you'll get special rights. Then the pandemic doesn't matter anymore. Then all of a sudden, everything is different. Everything's different. I can't believe we're being evicted from our home that we didn't even sell. That's what Deborah said when she found out that she was the victim of home title theft. This is a crime that can actually cost you your home. You see, your home's title's online where the bad guys, the cyber thieves, find it, and then they forge your signature stating that you sold your home to them. In Deborah's case, she didn't even find out about this until the eviction notice arrived. The only trusted folks to protect you from this are at Home Title Lock. Your home's legal title can be protected by a virtual barrier if you go with Home Title Lock. That's what they do. They will instantly mobilize to stop thieves from stealing your home's title and a lot of cash from you. So go to HomeTitleLock.com and register your home's address to see if you're a victim and don't know it. Use code BUCK for 30 free days of protection. That's code BUCK at HomeTitleLock.com. Again, go to HomeTitleLock.com. Use code BUCK.
I said they acted like stormtroopers, and they did, and my colleagues have said that as well. I'm an organizer. That's how I came into all of this, chair of the California Democratic Party. And peaceful protest is who we are and what we do. And do some other people come along and try to disrupt? Yes. But you don't send in people acting like stormtroopers into the scene and evoking even more unease and unrest. But he should be answering for what he did at Lafayette Square, a disgrace. So this is, it's really, he was like a blob. He was like just a henchman for the President of the United States instead of the Attorney General of the United States of America.
It's like Chardonnay socialist Nancy lives in a different dimension or something. I mean, it's definitely not the case that you would think she had actually watched that hearing, or you'd have to think that she watched it and is just really, really dumb. Calling the Attorney General a blob? Also, is that, I mean, he's an older guy. Is that some kind of like knock on his weight? I kind of, what did that?
Attorney General, it's just, I didn't say that they were stormtroopers. They were acting like stormtroopers. And then I fell asleep in my crudité. And then the staff came and woke me up and told me that, oh, Miss Nancy, perhaps it's time for a nap.
Most powerful elected Democrat in the country, folks. There you go. Pelosi. Yep. Saying just nonsense about Attorney General Barr. You know what would be fun to watch? A battle of wits between
Nancy Pelosi
and Attorney General Barr. It's just, I mean, it would be a heavyweight fighting a super featherweight, but nonetheless, it would be entertaining. It would be entertaining, that's for sure. And I meant that intellectually, not so as a bug. You don't actually want to see them in a steel cage match. No, I'm not a lunatic. It's the libs who want men and women to fight in MMA. I'm sorry, men who identify as women to fight women in MMA. That's not my position. That's not my preferred policy outcome. But I've been telling you that there's a deterioration in the agreement and understanding that we all have about some very core issues in society, things that should not be up for debate or discussion, things that we should all agree upon. And Democrats are abandoning them increasingly. Well, an example of that is what's happening right here. I think I've said on this show several times, I've talked to you about it, that I saw heroin use, with a needle in broad daylight, right next to where I live, in Broadway, in Midtown Manhattan, in New York City. That I saw this actually occur, and I've never seen that before in New York in my life. And I've seen a lot of things, and I've seen a lot of drug use, I've seen a lot of crime, I've seen stuff happen. And I mean, I used to be out a late night party kind of guy when I was like 17, 18 years old, believe it or not. I'd stay out till, well, sometimes all night long, but usually 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, I'd try to come home. But I never really got in any trouble. I was a good boy, but I did see some stuff. And I've never seen broad daylight heroin use with somebody who was clearly, a junkie. I don't know what else to say. Clearly a junkie. And I saw it. New York Post here in the city just did a story on this one about what they're calling Junkie Alley. And I know you could say this is something that has come up in your area, Buck, but this is just about, no, this is indicative. This is symbolic of what is happening to major Democrat cities all across these United States. They are being ruined. They are ruining these cities. They are destroying the biggest urban centers. When you have, and let me just tell you this, the cleanup process of Times Square, believe it or not, named for the New York Times, the left-wing rag that it has become, or perhaps it always was, and now we just see it. But Times Square was a place when I was a kid that you didn't want to go to. There were pickpockets everywhere. There were people running all kinds of scams. There were drug dealers on the streets, especially at night. A lot of drug dealers going on. Prostitutes, really well known for streetwalkers. Prostitutes just looking for Johns. I mean, it was so horrible, unsafe, depressing criminality rampant, and that was in the heart of New York City. And Giuliani came in and was like, enough of this stuff. Where, they started shutting down. They had all these I mean, it's amazing. I think back and see this when I was a kid. You know, I'd drive through the neighborhood with my parents. If we had to go to Lincoln Tunnel, you'd have to drive through this area. And there were whole stretches that were all these triple X peep shows and porno stores and all this stuff. And there was street walk. I mean, it was disgusting. It was like the red light district of Amsterdam without any of the bureaucratic oversight and cleanliness. And it's just nasty, the whole thing. And that got fixed. Now, well, I should say, until recently, if you come to New York, and I always tell people, don't go to Times Square. That's the worst part of the city. It's the biggest, crappiest chain restaurants, the most amount of people that are trying to rip off tourists. They love to do this thing where they ask you your name and they write it on a CD, and then they hand it to you and say, that'll be $20. That's my CD. Why you said your name, you want it, right? I mean, give me $20, give me $50. And if you don't, they get up in your face. They love to do that to tourists who are uncomfortable here, don't know what's going on, and I hate it whenever this happens. But the city, generally speaking, in Midtown at Times Square, turned into like Disney World. It was clean. You got Red Lobster, you got the Gap, you got movie theaters, and lots of police presence. That's gone away. All those things are shut down. There's been looting and rioting in the streets, as we all know. And now you have people who are laid out on the street. I mean, actually lying on the street and injecting themselves with hypodermic needles full of heroin in broad daylight while people are trying to go about their lives around them, while people are walking their kids to get some fresh air. We know they're not in school. Yeah. That's now New York. What better example could you have of the decay of Democrat cities than here in the single largest concentration of Democrat political power and wealth and media muscle? And I can't even go out. I cannot go and walk to Lula, the French bulldog, who's adorable, by the way. And if you follow me on Instagram, you will see her. So there's a big incentive there. But I cannot go outside and walk the dog now and not have there be a very serious possibility that I have to cross the street because of a clearly deranged person walking toward me in broad daylight. And you say, how do you know they're deranged? Because they're screaming curses at the sky and yelling racial epithets and being just complete lunatics. And they look like they haven't bathed in about 6 months, and their clothing is all torn, and they might have a heroin syringe sticking out of their arm. So I'm pretty sure, I mean, I'm not trying to judge a book by its cover, so to speak, but I'm pretty sure there's a person you don't want to walk very close to as they're, flailing their arms and cursing. And you see this all the time now. Oh, and de Blasio has spent over $1 billion, actually had his wife running a program that spent over $1.2 billion on mental health, assisting mental health. Mental health in the city is worse than it's ever been for everybody, particularly, though, for those who are truly mentally ill and need the most help. This is what you get when you put Democrats in charge, friends. Let's all remember that.
Bill O'Reilly here, and I need your help. Millions of Americans who believe that the USA is a noble nation are furious about what they're seeing in the streets. They're angry about anarchy being enabled by a dishonest media that is promoting hatred toward America. That's why we launched the Stand Up for Your Country campaign on BillO'Reilly.com. I knew it was going to be big. I didn't know it was going to be this big. We've had hundreds of thousands of signups, and we are flooding the zone with new stickers. Folks love these stickers. But most importantly, we have a philosophy. America is a good country, and we are going to prove that to you night after night. We hope you'll become a premium member on BillO'Reilly.com so you can access everything we do and join the campaign. But if you don't want to do that, just come on in and read what we have. Stand up for your country, because if you do not, we're going to lose it. Check out BillO'Reilly.com and join the campaign.
Oh, here's another great example of how Democrats now abandon things that for a long time they pretended they wanted to achieve as well, but just use different methods to achieve it. You know, border security, for example, safe streets, property rights, these kinds of things. You know, protecting federal courthouses, protecting public property. Here you have AOC, who is really the center of the Democrat Party's orthodoxy now. I mean, she is a perfect encapsulation of a lot of the superficialities that Democrats are desperate to sort of celebrate and advance. You know, she's young and she's female and she's Latina and all these things that the Democrats are just, that is what matters to them, not the content of a person's character or how intelligent or how worthwhile they are in their career field or whatever it may be. No. It's the diversity obsession added to this really socialist. I was going to say radical socialist, but isn't all socialism kind of radical? But she's perhaps a radical socialist mindset. You know, she just is the perfect encapsulation of what the modern Democrat Party is all about, what it believes in. It's kind of a brainless chanting of socialist slogans added to a lot of virtue signaling and a complete rejection of the knowledge that we have acquired as a society about what works and what makes for things that are objectively good. There are some things in society that it's not about what color you are, what gender you are, what religion you are. They're just objectively good for everybody, right? And we want that we want everybody to be safe on the streets, everyone to be safe in their homes. We want everyone to have their property rights respected and everybody to, you know, be treated fairly under the law. These are things that are supposed to hold us all together. They're the foundational concepts of our society. Democrats are attacking those. And until recently, you could argue that sovereignty, which is not possible without a secure border, is something that Democrats also at least give lip service to supporting. But now they've abandoned that as well. Now sovereignty is nationalism. Sovereignty is xenophobia. Here's AOC telling you where the Democrat Party is now in all of this. Play 11.
One of the big issues that we have in our country is that the amount of racism, I have ice cream, by the way, but the amount, with the amount of xenophobia that we're seeing, especially this administration, there's so much language that's disrespecting undocumented people when the fact of the matter is they're the ones these are the families and the individuals that are making sure that we're fed. They're often taking care of our children. They are often making sure that our workplaces and our homes are sanitary. And so we cannot go on with kind of these xenophobic narratives that undocumented people are somehow wrong.
Undocumented people are somehow wrong. Yes, you notice how that's why they want to call it undocumented, because it's a little bit heavier of a lift to say that we shouldn't consider illegal immigration to be wrong. Because of the very term, you'd say, so breaking the law is not wrong? Breaking the law is not wrong. I got to tell you, I'm wondering at what point the left's incoherence will actually start to turn people who are Democrats but still have their faculties of reason away from the party, at least to being independents. How could you be affiliated with this and think you're part of a movement that is intellectually consistent, intellectually worthwhile? The whole thing is really quite stunning, quite absurd. Quite absurd. Not nearly as absurd as the mostly peaceful mechanism. I meant to talk about this before. I just want to get into this. Representative Jordan, we're not going to go too deep into the hearings again. We've talked about that a lot. But Representative Jim Jordan spoke about the peaceful protest line that's out there, and I wanted to get this into the show. Play clip 13.
Are peaceful protests violent, Mr. Attorney General?
No.
Do peaceful protests destroy businesses?
No.
Do peaceful protests injure officers?
No.
Do peaceful protests attack civilians?
No.
Do peaceful protests burn down buildings?
No.
the video we played, it's hard to watch. It's really hard to watch, to see that happening in our great country. But there was the start of it was almost laughable, where you have the reporter saying, as a building is burning behind him, it's not generally speaking an unruly protest. It's mostly just a protest. I mean, it's almost laughable when you have the reporter saying, I guess he's saying it's not a fire, it's just a burning building. I guess he's saying it's a peaceful burning building.
That really has become, I think, in many ways, the best distillation of exactly what the Democrat Party has become. The Democrat Party and its media lackeys, I know we always go back and forth, or the Democrat lackeys of the media. I think it goes either way. You can make the case either way. They are really exemplified now by having reporters stand in front of burning buildings, focusing their attention, editorializing with their focus on how most of the people weren't the ones lighting this building on fire. It's really important to establish that. When they will also, they spend how much time trying to impugn and undermine all Trump supporters by saying that a bunch of tiki torch carrying morons in Charlottesville were somehow symbolic of the entire Trump movement, and then they lied about Trump supporting them, which he did not do. Lie. One of the biggest lies they've told about Trump of all. That's a huge one. And it's one that they relied on for years to, people that don't pay very close attention, that have lives to live. And, I don't knock people that aren't spending all their time in this matrix of political propaganda, right? People have lives. I always tell you, listen to this show and, maybe watch like Tucker and then call it a day. I mean, that's it, right? I mean, that's what you get, I think. That's all you need. But nonetheless, I can't help but be furious, frustrated, and, you reach this point where you just wonder how, and it sounds a little bit like, how dare you, sir? I know that, but it's like, how do they feel good about themselves in the media when they do this, when they lie in this way? How could they think that this was, a reasonable position for them? How could they think that they're not a part of the problem? Well, it all depends on what your goal is. Make an omelet, you got to break a few eggs. If you're a Democrat, to elect Joe Biden, you got to burn down a few federal courthouses, apparently. Right? It's all part of the destroy the country, be an insurgency. Forget about a campaign of unity and uplift and good ideas. Joe Biden doesn't have any of that. Hey, I'm Joe Biden. I'm here. I'm just going to talk real loud. And I look like any moment now I might just fall asleep for a bit. It's been a long day. There's Corn Pop. I said, hey, man. Hey, Corn Pop. How's it been, buddy? It's been, here I am. 7 little chipmunks sitting on a branch, eating a lot of acorns on Joe Biden's ranch. Step into my office. Joe Biden supposed to fix all this, supposed to make it all better. But not until he wins. They're not even going to talk about anything else, really, because right now, Joe Biden is just a placeholder. There is misery, and then there is something else. That is the choice they are forcing upon the country. That is what they're trying to do. They are making the country feel like its future is bleak and that things are going terribly right now. And I don't just mean, we don't have workers need higher wages or the usual Democrat stuff. I'm saying they want you to think you're going to die if Joe Biden does not win the election. You're going to die from COVID, or maybe you're going to die from riots that turn violent. I don't know. Could be either. But that's the perception they want you to have. Ted Cruz said this, and he absolutely nailed it. Play clip 14.
And I'll tell you, the fundamental choice here is do we want people working or not? What you incentivize, you get more of. What the Democrats want is they want to incentivize, they want to pay people not to work because they want as many people not working as possible between now and Election Day. Our objective should be maximizing the rewards for working and getting people back in the workforce. And I believe the election in November is going to turn on that question. If we're back at work, Donald Trump wins and Republicans have a good election. But if the Democrats succeed, their objective, they want tens of millions of people at home alone, unemployed, broke, and ticked off because they think that's how they elect Joe Biden. And that is really cynical and a bad outcome.
Yes, it is. Cynical and a bad outcome, but that is what they're doing. That is what they want. That is the reality that we are facing now. Speaking of Democrat plans to make things worse for people, there is the project of the Obama administration affirmatively furthering fair housing. Right, that is the project of the Obama administration. We all remember this. And the short version of what this would be is a usage of the federal government through zoning laws and regulations, to make sure that they are pushing for public housing. We call it projects here in New York, or at least we used to. Public housing to be set up in suburbs. High density public housing. So moving a large structure that will be predominantly people who are going to be either getting Section 8 vouchers or are in either subsidized or free housing, depending on what their income is, and to move those into the suburbs. Now, look, a lot of people need help. I get it, and this is not about saying, well, why would anybody, why would anybody want to try to promote a better life for people who are going to be living in public housing than what they have in a lot of the crime-filled neighborhoods where you tend to have in urban areas public housing. But we also know that there is a public housing police authority, for example, in New York, just for public housing, because there's such a concentration of crime that occurs in public housing units here. That's just a fact. This is just what happens. And you also know that public housing, if you live near it, can be incredibly damaging. And this is just the market speaking. People can say whatever they want. It can be incredibly damaging to property values. People tend to not. And again, this is where Democrats, they like to push these policies as long as it doesn't affect them. They want you, if you live out somewhere in the suburbs or even pretty close to what would be rural areas, they want a big public housing project right, in your neighborhood, and then the additional strain and resources needed for it in your school system, and that's what they want. They want to make sure that they are moving that out into the suburbs. Now, I'm just going to tell you this right now. This is similar to some of the policies that de Blasio in New York, I don't know what it is in other cities, pushes for having SRO, single room occupancy hotels, where people, which are just known to be places where there's a lot of drug use and a lot of crime going on, and it's, they can get zoned for them, but for people that can't afford, that won't get a lease, that no landlord will rent to them, they want these SROs where you just rent a room by the day, and they're obviously going to be places that you see a lot of people with a tremendous amount of problems showing up. Nancy Pelosi's not going to live next to them, okay? And this is where the fraudulence of the Democrats comes to the forefront once again. Nancy Pelosi, the rich libs, the same way that they want to talk about how your school district, well, first of all, you can't have a charter school option, and your school district, really you should have a forced greater diversity agenda in your school, wherever your school is. That it's not allowed to just be people from the community. They want to bring people from the poorest parts of the city and make sure or poorest part of your county and make sure they're in your school, but not in the Democrats' own school district. No, they don't want that, right? The politicians who push this always reject it when it's in their backyard. The same thing here with these affirmatively furthering fair housing regulations. They do this because they want to say, see, Republicans are being racist because they don't want large public housing projects put in the middle of the suburbs, when people have moved to the suburbs for less housing density and less crime. That's one of the big, and a better school system. Well, if you're going to build huge, remember, this is the government intruding on the market saying, we're going to build a large a large housing project in your neighborhood, it's not that some developer said, yeah, there's a market for this. People want to live here. It's no, we're going to park this here as the government. We're going to change the zoning regulations and say this is where it needs to be. You got more strain on your schools, the likelihood of rising crime, and certainly more housing density, which we all know now, too, in the era of COVID is a big thing. Well, I bring it up because the Democrats have been wanting to do this for a long time. Donald Trump just tweeted out around lunchtime today, I'm happy to inform all the people living their suburban lifestyle dream that you will no longer, the president says here, no longer be bothered or financially hurt by having low-income housing built in your neighborhood. Your housing prices will go up based on the market and crime will go down. I have rescinded the Obama-Biden affirmatively furthering fair housing rule. Enjoy. So there you go. The president taking another action here. Housing should be based on the market and based on individual choices. It should not be the federal government doing this social engineering, because you know what happens if you create greater housing density and bring more crime to a suburb? People will leave that suburb, go to another suburb, and it just keeps happening, right? Instead of looking at why suburbs that are doing well, not all of them do, some of them have a lot of crime, but instead of looking at why a suburb is doing well and trying to replicate that elsewhere, they figure, let's take the problems that we know exist in cities and have for decades and make it much worse. You know what? Another thing is, housing project can never go up in value. Never go up in value. Doesn't go up in value. When the government builds low-income housing, that's what it is, always and forever. So you know what does that mean? How does that help the surrounding neighborhood? You've effectively created an artificial drag on property, so people, you know what they want to do? They want to leave. And the cycle continues, and it continues. But Democrats, they want to pull other people into that cycle as long as it's not rich Democrat donors and people that go on CNN and make lots of money. They don't have to deal with that.